Okay, so this is our second installment of what I've been calling "listen to the lights." That's an expression that you've probably heard, or maybe not, but the Rebbe always spoke about it. Listening. The lights of Hanukkah have a story to tell, and what we're doing here is exploring that story and the inner meaning of that story. And what we did last week, to consolidate a little bit, I'll explain in a minute. But first, I started something this morning in Tanya Shir, which I'd like to do here also, which two things. One, first, to give thanks and acknowledgement to our Chayolim in the land of Israel. As it says in Pasuk, Hashem oiz lamo yiten. Hashem gives strength to his people. And that word oiz is spelled with an ayin, zayin, meaning, which is the same word as a uzi. Uzi is my strength. And also the pasuk says, "Ein oiz el Torah." There's no strength except Torah. So I'd like to just dedicate this year and bring out the fact that learning Torah, which we're doing now, is our little contribution at this hour anyway. I'm sure we have other contributions that we're doing to the strength, to the uzi, to the strength and the victory of our soldiers in the land of Israel, and ultimately to the victory of the war that we're all fighting in our own way to bring Mashiach. That's number one. And number two, I'd like to give us at the opening of this an opportunity for anyone who would like to mention a name for Refuah Shlema. This shir should also be dedicated to the Refuah Shlema of whomever you would like to name. So let me give you an opportunity if you want to. Okay.
Elka Rachel Bat Aliza.
Elcha Rachel Bat Aliza should have a Refuah Shlema immediately. Anybody else? Okay. So we started to say that last week what we did was look at the structure of the lantern of the menorah. One bulb, one leg of the menorah, the lantern, right? It has three components. It has the vessel, which is actually the lantern, the word ner, vessel, lantern. It has a wick, which is the pasila, that's the word in Hebrew for the wick. And it has a fuel, which in the case of the Hanukkah menorahs, the way we light them, and the most hidur way of lighting them is with olive oil. And in the Beis HaMikdash, of course, they were lit with oil, which is shemen. So these three words, ner, basila, and shemen, are the letters nun, pei or fei, and shin, which spells nefesh. So the first thing we've learned last week is that when we're listening to the lights, the story that they're telling is the story of ourselves, the story of who we are, and more importantly, what we are, how we are constructed. We are a lantern. We are meant to be lamplighters, right? Our job is to light up the world. And that's one of the reasons, although we didn't learn this last week, that one of the reasons that the halacha of nights of Shabbos, of the Hanukkah lights, unlike the lights in the Beis HaMikdash, the lights of Hanukkah are lit at night to light up the darkness. And the darkness is the color black in the candle, and the light is the color white. So those are a few of the things that we talked about last week. Tonight we're going to go more into depth on the mitzvah itself and how this lantern of Hanukkah is emblematic of all the mitzvahs. So if you have the text in front of us in Torah Or, it's on page 64, second column. And I want to, again, just start by saying, I not only encourage you, but really need you to interrupt me along the way, because we're learning. We're not just sitting here listening, right? We're learning. And learning implies that we're understanding. And anytime we don't understand, we ask a question, please. And in addition to that, anytime you have a comment on what we're learning. I mean, there's a famous expression you all heard of. Much have I learned from my teachers, but most have I learned from my students. And the more interactive it is, the more we'll all learn. Aviva, yeah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, that being said, just from last week, where it said the Knesset Yisrael is also called the menorah. What's the source for that?
The source for that, I'm thinking, if it's in my head, and maybe in the footnotes in the back. If you point to, can you point to me on the page where it says that?
Yeah, it's on Lamed
Beis, second column.
Yeah, for sure.
Second column. I could look it up.
It's like about 3/4 of the way down. The line starts Los, and it's Hine Knesset Yisrael Makar Nishmos Yisrael Nikra B'Shem Menorah.
Nikra B'Shem Menorah. I see where it is. Let me see if I can look it up in the footnotes here. Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis. No, doesn't give a footnote, and I don't know. Just make sure Cohen Benedos.
It might seem nitpicky, but
no, it's not nitpicky. It's good to know. Masha Nimshel, no, that's a different one. Yeah, no, I don't see it. Sorry.
Okay.
But you started to say but.
No, but Knesset Yisrael, it turns out, has so many other kinds of names, like Knesset Yisrael, Menorah,
well, we can explain why he's using that particular mushal, right? Because just like the if you remember from last week, just like the menorah has to be from one piece of gold that's beaten out into 7 branches in the Beis Hamikdash, 8 in the Hanukkah menorah. So the Jewish people are formed from one singular point of godliness, and they fan out into 600,000 times 600,000, meaning that just like every branch of the menorah not only originates in, but contains that singularity from which it's hewn, so every single Jew, no matter how many we are, all contains something of that singularity, which is the Or Ein Sof itself. So that's the purpose of bringing that particular metaphor to the table when we're talking about the menorah. Does that make sense? In other words, we're not constructing. Yeah, okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay. Good. But that's what I like. Thank you. Good lesson for all of us. Really, if any question you have is important, particularly if you think it's an unimportant or dumb question, then it's particularly important. Okay? So, Tanu Rabbanim, right? Left column of page, what?
Perfect. Okay, I just wanted you to repeat exactly where we're holding.
Yeah, page 64 in the text, left-hand column, top of the left-hand column.
Thank you.
Tanu Rabbanim, this is from the Gemara. Mitzvahs ner Hanukkah. This is Gemara Shabbos. By the way, all the story of Hanukkah and the mitzvahs Hanukkah is in Gemara Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Beis Shammai Oimrim, two schools of thought, right? Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai said, Yom Rishon Madlik Ches. On the first day of Hanukkah, we light 8. Mikan ve'elech Peseach. We lessen it, and we continue diminishing. So that's one point of view of reality, right? There's the Or Ein Sof, which is everything, and then it goes to a tzimtzum, one tzimtzum after another. That's the analog to Beis Shammai's perspective. It's all on the table. That's the 8, and then each day there's a lesson. Now, of course, that's not the halacha today. It's not the halacha today. The halacha is as follows. Beis Hillel says, Yom Rishon Madlik Echad, first day 1, and then Mekan ve'elech Maisif v'choyle. We bring more and more light out of the darkness. So he does not start with there's an allness of all bright dark light, and it goes diminishing through the tzimtzum. He goes from the perspective of from the bottom. We live in the world of tzimtzum, in the world of dark, and our job is each day to add more and more light. And of course, that's the way we proceed. On the expression you see in these small words in words in the parentheses, Mylin B'Kodesh. It's an expression from Chazal. You always do elevate in Kodesh. You're always going up when it comes to holy things. Now we're also going to, there's a notion of, on Sukkot, the non-Jewish people in the end day bring korbanos to the temple, and they diminish one day after another, and that's analogous to one of the perspectives of the lights of Hanukkah. So Naktim Beis Shammai near mitzvah, and so now in order to understand this, we're going to first preface Masha Kosov, what it's written in Mishlei. It's written in Mishlei. It says Ner mitzvah v'Torah or. So the first thing we're going to explain is what are mitzvahs, but in the particular metaphor of lantern. How are mitzvahs like a lantern? And the Torah is like light. Sheha mitzvahs, and we're going to focus on mitzvahs, which is what we're focusing on in our parts of the Tanya we're learning as well. Sheha mitzvahs nikra neros. They're called ner. The mitzvahs are called a lantern. The Gam Kasiv, it's also written, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. And there's another lantern, also Shlomo HaMelech. The lantern of Hashem is the soul of a person. So we have mitzvahs, well, the Ner Hanukkah, right? The lantern of Hanukkah, the lantern of mitzvahs, and the lantern of the soul. Shashom and Nikra Ner. And in the Zohar it explains mitzvahs nikra levushim. The mitzvahs are called garments. They're the ways in which Hashem dresses himself up, so to speak. That's the metaphor of garments. He has a certain will for something. That will is the will for the 613 mitzvahs. We've learned in other places that the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah and the 7 from the Rabbanan are gematria crown. So the crown is the deepest part of Hashem's being. It's the beginning of his expression. I'm pointing to my head, right? The crown, the skull. The skull in Kabbalah has a very active meaning. It's not just a bone. It's that which surrounds the brain. The brain is where thought starts coming, and thought drips down lower and lower and lower. That's a metaphor of the thought coming down lower and lower and lower is the entirety of what we call Seder HaHastalshalis, drippings down of godliness throughout all the levels of creation. But the source, and that's called Yesh, the substantiality of God's expression as it drips down through all creation, starting from the brain. But the brain is an organ which receives from something higher, and that's called the skull. The skull is the surrounding, which in the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus is the Or HaSoivev, which is called the ayin. It appears to be nothing. I'm knocking on this skull here. It seems to be nothing but a bone. But it isn't nothing. It's the source of everything. It's just that it hasn't materialized yet into something that we can touch and feel and see. That all happens in the brain and on down. Okay, so the mitzvahs are called garments. The mitzvahs, because this is where he dresses up. That's where I started. He dresses himself up in 613 or 620, if you count the mitzvahs of the Rabbanim, 620 different appearances, which is he's putting on this garment, and he changes his garments into another garment, and each of the garments the Zohar calls a garment. Each of the mitzvahs the Zohar calls a garment. So we have at least three things on the table that are called. We have the Hanukkah lights, right, the lantern. We have the mitzvahs being called a lantern. We have the soul being called a lantern. And the mitzvahs being called, in addition to calling a lantern, are called garments. And why are they called garments? Asher hanashama mislabeshes behem. Because the mitzvah, the soul, dresses itself up in them. Meaning that the purpose of the soul being invested in the body and in giving life to the body is in order that the body should do the mitzvahs. So the soul encloses itself in the body in order to do mitzvahs. And the soul is enclosed, and okay, Asher neshama mislabish bohem, and the soul is enclosed in them. And in Gan Eden, what happens is that the mitzvahs that you do are revealed for what they really are, that they're expressions of godliness and not just simple actions. We understand that they're godly things because we understand, because we've learned. But we don't see the godliness in the thing until the soul is released from the body, and then we can see it. But and the soul has to do 613 mitzvahs in order that the garment that it will have so that it can experience godliness in the higher world is complete. The neshama, nothing can see godliness face on. In fact, we learned that in today's Tanya. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the mountain and God tells him, no one can see my face. I'll show you only my backside. So you need something to be a receptacle for this light, which we call a garment, like you put on sunglasses to be a receptacle for the sunlight. That's called a garment. So the soul needs a garment. It has to be enclosed in the garment. So now that we're talking language of the Zohar, that the mitzvahs are called a garment, if one garment is lacking, if one mitzvah is lacking, you're missing a garment. So your reward in Gan Eden is going to be incomplete because you don't have the apparatus to apprehend it. Therefore, so you want to know something? If you haven't completed the 613 or 620, you have to come back in order to fulfill the mitzvahs, the mitzvah shahi chasur that you've been lacking. In order to complete the set of garments, the set of receptacles, the set of clothing that you need in order to be dressed properly so that you can receive the king. Nice metaphor. Let's explain this idea of the inyan, because we're explaining mitzvahs, right? Ner mitzvah. A lantern is a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a garment. So in order to explain this, in Gan Eden, the souls get their pleasure, that's the word nani, they have their hanor from a ray of the Shekhinah, the ray of the divine presence. Now, what's it mean, a ray? Why does it say it? This is all language largely from the Arizal, but of Kabbalah in general. These metaphors. So we have a ray of the Shekhinah. We don't get the Shekhinah itself, God presence openly. we get a ray of the Shekhinah. Down here, we get less of that. It's embodied in the Ma'aseh mitzvah, but we don't see it. In Gan Eden, we see the ray, but it's just a ray. But it's a ray of the Shekhinah. Back to our Aviva's conversation at the beginning about the menorah. Even though we're just branches, right? And we're not just one of the 7 or 8, we're one of 600,000 times 600,000, the way you expressed it on the previous learning last week. Nevertheless, embedded in us, enclosed as it were in us, is godliness itself from its origin point. So the soul gets pleasure not from the Shekhinah itself, but from the ray of the Shekhinah, but the Shekhinah is invested in it. And this idea of a ziv, a ray, hu ha'ora, it's a illumination, a radiation, ma'or ein sof, from the infinite light. U'mis'angen ha'neshomas began Eden, and the neshomas in Gan Eden have pleasure from this. Shemasigim eze ha'ora, from grasping some of that light. Mehaziv, from the ray. U'bechinas haziv hu ha'ora ma'ein sof bli gvul, and as he says, that ray is a ray, but it's a ray of the infinite, which is without limitation. In other words, it's also an example of infinity being clothed in something finite, a ray. You see kind of where you're going. If you look at the lantern of the menorah, right, you could look at the origin of it and stare at the flame on the wick, or you could walk away or look around the room, and if the room is dark, take pleasure in the ha'ora, the ray of the light that's coming from the menorah. But you're aware, because you have the menorah in front of you, that it's all coming from this singular source. Therefore, there's 2 levels in Gan Eden, a higher level in the higher world, which we call Bria, and then there's Gan Eden Tachton, the lower world, which is called Yetzirah. Aval Pratia specifically, Yesha Sogas B'li Gvul. There really are infinite number of levels of Gan Eden. So don't despair. What I mean by that is, sometimes we despair that I can't see, I don't feel Elikus, right? Well, you'll feel it. But not only will you feel it, and you will feel it in this world, because soon that revelation that we're talking about, which is available in Gan Eden, will be revealed even higher. That's the revelation of Mashiach. But speaking just of the normative history so far, the Shoma comes in the body, it yearns for Elikus. If it learns, learning deepens the yearning, right? Learning Panemius Torah, particularly in Chassidus, deepens the yearning. The yearning is satisfied by our experience of the taste of God, but not God himself, the taste of God, the feel of God. And then when we go to Gan Eden, we have even a greater experience of that. And that's step 1 of an infinite number of steps and realms that our neshama ascends into, until it ascends back into its origin, which is deep in the crown, deep in the innermost consciousness of God himself. And in Gan Eden, that's the point, there are great understandings without limit. Sadiqim yolchim achayil chol. You may have heard this expression. Sadiqim go from strength to strength. We give people brucha that may you go from strength to strength. May you go from one level of consciousness and connection to God to a deeper level of consciousness and connection with God. Aviva.
Is that what it means when, like, Moshe Rabbeinu got to the 50th gate? Is that the 50th gate inside God's head?
That's correct. 50th gate inside God's head, right? Sharim. 50 gates of consciousness. Yeah, and that's just a metaphor. I mean, 50 is just an expression of a large amount. And they pick 5 for reasons. There's 4 worlds, starting with Atzilus, and then there's a source of all worlds, which has the 5th, right? And there are many explanations and 5 times 10 is 10 spheros. There are many explanations, but yes, the simple answer is yes. Going from chayil chayil, from one gate of consciousness to a higher gate of consciousness, going from strength to strength. Asher nishmosam nisalu ba'ili yachad aliyah, as the neshama rises from one level to another, like the flame rising from the wick, right? We noticed that last week. The flame has a nature that it wants to rise up and ultimately to even leave the wick. The body, you know, the expression that you may have heard, al kochacha ator chai, the neshama up when it's up above, they have to force it to come down and live in this world of darkness where there's a lot of avoida. And once it's in this world and doing the avoida, it doesn't want to leave. It's reluctant to leave. But the leaving is a process also of more and more enlightenment as you go from the center of the wick to the externality of the wick, where the white light exists, from the blue light to the white light. Aliyah after aliyah. Ki ein misper, he says it very clear. Ein misper lahasagis or v'ziv. There's no number to this. This is an infinite progression upward. There's no limit to the levels of understanding of in the or and the ziv, just in the light and the ray. Ashehi ha'orah or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is a radiation from the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. And each time the neshama needs to go from one level to another, it has to first go through a river of fire. So the idea is this, that in any state of reality that you exist, and let's make this very simple. Us down here on planet Earth, we all get accustomed to certain things. And when push comes to shove, meaning circumstances say, you got to move on, it's difficult. It's difficult to move on because, number one, we've got attachments to where we are. And number two, we've learned to navigate where we are. No matter how I may look into where you are and say, whoa, well, I don't know if I could handle that burden, that difficulty that you're having. But in a certain way, you are handling it. And to move on from there it's difficult to remove yourself from those attachments. So similarly, or you know, even simply, if you to come into a new framework of mindfulness, a new framework of consciousness, it's hard to give up the old one. You know, when you come into new understandings, new paradigms, you might say, and we've attached ourselves to other paradigms, so there's a certain rupture in the where we came from to the way we're going. So similarly, the neshamas, when they go up above, why the mashal is river of fire? Because fire purifies, right? If a knife gets treif, and you can purify the only way. Well, not a knife. If something else gets treif, you can, like an oven. You can purify it through a torch, through fire. It burns off the dross, which until now, the experience you've been having was not a dross. But now when you see a higher layer, a higher level of being, so you want to discard that. So the river of fire burns out. And this is a continual, infinite elevation from one state of purity becomes the next state of impurity as you go higher and higher. Kol hasogis hakadmos, and that's the idea, that to move from one stage of consciousness to another, you have to nullify the previous state of consciousness. Or, in language of tahara and tuma and tara, if you want to get rid of tuma, you have to burn it away in order to become tahir. And then it all becomes relative. The next level is, etc., repeats that. Because the what you had previously in regard to the one which is above it, there's no comparison. So you have to you have to completely nullify that previous way of looking at things. This is the state of I'll just say it simply, like the Einstein state, you know, the discovery state, the new paradigm, the paradigm shift. That's a language that's used in culture, to create a paradigm shift while the old paradigm has to be cast away. In faith, the new new hasog is push away the old ones. And then you get closer and closer, but you never ever reach the Ein Sof himself because it's infinite by definition. Imke. Therefore, Kol Hasogi Yisera Shemasig Mehaor Hasoga Shelamata, any comprehension, any way of any vision that you had of something in relation to something higher is botlan, and that becomes nullified. Now he's going to explain what I just explained. To explain this, the Chachamim have an expression, interesting expression, called tzaddik nekave b'chuposo shel chavore. Every tzaddik is burned up from the chuppah, from the canopy, the tent of his friends. In other words, one way that it's explained, there's a certain amount of, take the word positively that I'm about to say, jealousy. You know, I mean, it's plain. There's a hayom somewhere that says, when it comes to gashmius, you should look at someone who has it worse than you, and you'll feel better about what you have. When it comes to ruchnius, you should look at someone who is more evolved, more elevated than you, and yearn for that and strive for that. That's the way to take the jealousy here. They see, I'm down here below, right? And there's tzaddik who knows who up there in his canopy, and I'm in my canopy, and I get a sense of what's going on up there, right? So I'm yearning for that. I have a fire for that. I want to get to that. For that surrounding, that light which is surrounding my friend up there at the next level. Because the understandings that we have are not equal. Now, just speaking about each of us on this call, each of us have different ways. We could be looking at the same thing and seeing different things. I saw this person's face, and I may interpret it, that person looks kind of stern. Another says, well, actually, he looks angry. You know, I thought he looked really tired. He was so straight-faced. So we all have different ways of comprehending the same thing. So each and every one of us has a hasoga acheres, a different understanding. In terms of the level, the kind of pleasure that he takes from the ray of the Shekhinah, and which shines Hameir La'olav, which shines on him, on that same person. And this is what it means. All the holy ones, the holy animals, the angels. Yahalalucha. Yahalal is also an expression of light. Yahalo, like the word in English, halo, is an expression of light. So each and every day, all the holy ones, Yahalalucha, and the way it's translated in the Siddur, praise. They praise each one. Sela Kedoshim. Now, who are these Kedoshim? Hainu Neshomas Began Eden. These are the souls, I said angels, correct me. These are the souls in Gan Eden. They're all called Kedoshim, right? We are all called Kedoshim. Kedoshim Tihya, the whole Parshas Kedoshim. You will be Kedoshim in front of Hashem. And Yahalalucha Selah, what does that mean? Kol Mokim Shenemar Selah, anytime it says Selah, which we translate always, Hu Bechinas Bli Gvul, it means without limit. The praise, the light, the praise of God, that we can praise God deeper and deeper and deeper from deeper levels of ourselves. The light of God that shines from the deeper and deeper darkness that we turn over, that we transform. Each one of these things is a metaphor for the notion of burning with, yearning with, and praising. Because it's bligvu, it's without limit. Because if a person is really open, this is very interesting, a person who's open is completely renewing his or her understanding or level of consciousness all the time in their ability to relate to different levels of the Or Sof. Asher-hi bli gvul, because it itself is limitless. Therefore, Omer, our sages said, Mutav le'dedainu v'leise la'alma da'asi. This is speaking about Elisha ben Avuha. Elisha ben Avuha is called Acher. You know, he's the one who, he was the teacher of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir is one of the huge ones of Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir. A Mishnah in the Talmud that doesn't name who it's from is in the name of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Elisha ben Avuha was his teacher, and he went completely off the derech. He completely lost it. And it says about him, better that he be judged in order that he can come into the next world. Mutav de ledaino v'leise le'almadas. Let him be judged, go through whatever he needs to go through to deal with those things in order to come to la'alma da'asi, the world to come. Ki ein kedai kol hadinim. Ki ein kedai kol hadinim neged tainuk hasagosoy. You can't compare, no matter what the punishment, the dinim are, they're worth it in order to get the tainug of any level of Olam Haba. Even though the lower of Gan Eden is not comparable at all to the next higher level of Gan Eden. This is all, by the way, this language, I mean, we're getting deep into what is this all about? Well, really, it's all about transforming darkness into light. It's all about deeper and deeper levels of radiation, illumination. And that's signified simply by that you can take a look at one candle. And one candle, you see how a plain piece of cloth standing in a plain piece of glass, right? And this I'll recapitulate something we said last week. If you strike a match to that plain piece of cloth, it's not going to burn except for a few seconds. It's going to be burned right up. However, if you add shemen, shemen is the notion of higher level consciousness, the crown, right? Because shemen floats on top of everything. Then the wick can shine a light. So these mitzvahs that we do are investing ourselves in call it a fuel. Because here it's in our metaphor, it's a lavush. It's a garment. It enables our souls to be able to glow and shine and illuminate. And we don't have to wait for all this time in Gan Eden. He's just giving us the sense of how these illuminations are infinite, and one can go from one level to another. We can do that, and we have that opportunity every day to go from one level of observance of mitzvahs, one level of performance of mitzvahs, one level of feeling the connection with Elokus, to a higher level each and every day, by purifying, burning up the dross, right? Whatever we did yesterday should be, what we say in some, I think we say it in this, even in America, tomorrow should be better than today. That's the idea we're learning. And that's one of the things we're learning from the light, that we can improve things, the wick, by adding a higher level of consciousness to Shemin. And that's mitzvahs. So the Chein Gan Eden Tachton is going on with this, the lower level of Gan Eden to the higher level of Gan Eden. Hadoraim HaMailas, the highest levels, which the highest levels get into the crown itself. The deeper level of the crown is called Oineg or Tainug, Tainugim, Shenimshichum Ha'orin Sof, which is drawn from the light of the Infinite One. Kol HaTainugim, all the delights, which are ultimately sourced in the panemius of the crown. And these are all Bligvul without limitation. I'm pausing for my breath. Also want to do a checkpoint in time. By the way, I mean, we are not rushing here. We're going to go, I told you last week was the second time or the first time? Yeah, the first time, that we're taking our time. We got up to Hanukkah. I mean, the time will go fast, but the idea of each night, each hour, we're going to go as far as we go, and we'll continue right from here the next time. So we're not in a rush. So if there are things hanging around that you want to express, again, do it now and do it anytime. Okay. We're back to where we are. Just let me take a plea. I'd like to. After Gan Eden Tachton, the line begins with abbreviation of Gan Eden, Gan Eden Elyon. Shin Beis Gimel Ayin. That's the line begins like that. In the Gan Eden Elyon and Tachton, excuse me, in Gan Eden, Shibbe Gan Eden, Beis Gimel Ayin. In Gan Eden Tachton, in the lower Garden Eden, Einere Klal, there's no comparison to what's at a higher level. The Gan Eden Tachton, and also the lower level of Gan Eden, is incomparable to the higher level, the next level up. Adorai Mamaylas, that's actually where we were, until the highest levels. Ki hatainugim, the delights, shenimshichu ma'or sof, which are drawn from the Infinite One, who is the source of all delights, in bli gvul, are without limitation. So he gives an example. As we see in daily life, in actuality, well, not exactly daily reality. I mean, it's a metaphor. Anyone who's fallen in what he calls shviras hakelim, that itself is a metaphor, which we have spoken about in the Tanya class, but just to, I don't know if everyone's, maybe it's some, is there anyone who's not at all familiar with the notion of shviras hakelim, the breaking of the vessels? Anyone who's not? You're all good with it, right? Okay. So, but he gives an interesting twist. The vessels of the high world of toil fell down, 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 down. And where's the bottom point? Hainugim Gashmin. The delights, kind of remember, is the innermost part of the crown. And these sparks from there fell down, down until they got invested in physical desires, physical pleasures. Okay, Ugam came in sheer. He's giving the opposite side here. Just like there's an infinite way up, there's an infinite way down. There are infinite numbers of tainugim olam hazeh that a person could, God forbid, lose him or herself in. Yesh kama mini tainugim. There are many kinds of delights in the physical worlds, which represent what's the source of the multitude of physical delights in this world? The strong lights, many mites and many sparks that fell from the world of Toivu. Hidu, as is known, as everybody knows. There are tainugim in this world, la'ein misper, without number. Im kain, therefore, halachas kamech with kama, how much more so, hashorashu mokal zeh, as he said, if there are many delights down here, infinite, and they're a result of something up there, then there's something up there in the source, tainig ruchni, the spiritual delights, af mi Gan Eden Tachton, even if it's only the lower Gan Eden, also are bli gvul, and they're because they're all from the Ein Sof. Ulevarze, to explain this, no, uleba'avurze, for this sake, neshama, the neshama, shehi bechinis bali gvul, which is a limited thing, and neshama is a creation, and anything created is limited to it's this and it's not that. So the neshama, which is something limited, it's impossible for the neshama to understand, to grasp the revelation of the ray of the Shekhinah, shehu mahus elokus, which is the essence of godliness. Ki'im alidei lavush. It needs a garment. This is back to where we started in the first place. Shehu bechinas mesach. So in order to have any sense of elokus, you can't look it in the eye, it'll blind you. You can't see it face to face because the panemius of elokus is without any kind of description at all, without any shape, form, tangibleness at all. It's invisible. It's ayin. It's no thing. It's a thing which is no thing, because they always translated it something from nothing. But you got to understand, nothing is not nothing. Nothing means that it has no thingness. It has no definition. It doesn't take up space or time. It's not in any way graspable, right? It's more than Mercury. right? It just you can't get it at all. The only way you can get any sense of it is through tzimtzum, through sunglasses, etc., through a curtain. And through that garment, umesa, in the curtain, you can get the light and the ray. Is explained in the writings of the Kabbalah Eitz Chaim. These metaphorical terms are coined in the Kabbalistic writings. Mesak, a curtain, or something that blocks, and a pargud, which is definitely a curtain. For example, he gives a mashal which I think we've all heard before. Or a gadol, if you have a big light, but you can't gaze at it, because of its great brightness. Now, if you have a curtain in between, then the light becomes something you can take. You can after the light is hidden. So this may be simple to all of you, but it's something very profound, that godliness can be experienced, and only if it's through concealment. As we said this morning, we quoted a pasuk, Olam Chesed Yabana, which plainly translates, he built the world with kindness, right? But that word Olam, Ayin Lamed Mem, Olam, Hey Ayin Lamed Mem, is Allah means to hide as well. The kindness of Hashem was that he hid himself from us, because if he didn't hide himself from us, we would just burn up, and we would be no thing also. There would be no yesh ma'ayin, and we wouldn't be able to have any relationship from him. So the helam of the light, a little bit, through the curtain, through Al Yidei Mesach, allows us to have a relationship with Hashem. Ukamei davar chokmah, for instance, take a concept, a davar chokmah. The Seichel Gadol, a very deep concept, a new breakthrough set of formulae for understanding reality, right? This can't be explained. The teacher, the professor, can jot at all the notations on the board, and they're very meaningful to the professor, but the little 6-year-old sitting in the room, there could be artistic scratchings, drawings, right? You can't explain that. That's not how you explain to a little child. Child's not going to get anything from all of that. The chokmah, about that wisdom. Ki al yidei lavush, you have to bring it down. A lavush, you have to put it in some kind of garment, some kind of receptacle that the student can relate to. Or a mashal. That's the thing, right? It says that, that Shlomo Melech calls the entire Torah mashal, the primordial mashal. The whole entire Torah is a mashal for godly reality, or for reality, how reality comes into being. That's the Ma'aser HaMakava, how creation exists, and about the whole union of godliness itself. Mashal HaKadmoin, that's what he calls it. The primordial mashal is the Torah. And through a mashal, was Meben Hadavar, then the kid, the 6-year-old, can understand it. So Kamai came to Kroim mitzvahs levushim. All of this was to explain 2 words in the Zohar, 3 words. Mitzvahs nekroyim levushim. Mitzvahs are called a garment, right? Shehem gam came bechinas mashal, because mitzvahs are a mashal. Mitzvahs are a mashal. We talked about this. This is an interesting one. About in the Tanya, he speaks about the physical things that we do mitzvahs with. They are an embodiment of the deepest levels of Hashem, because they embody what his ratzon, his will, which is the externality of his crown. And even deeper than that, what gives him pleasure is his tainug, is a neshama in a body attaching itself to rectifying the physical, right? So that itself is a mashal. And he gives an example of this, the esrog. And the esrog says, for example, when you hold the esrog, you're holding atzmus, or as close as you can get to atzmus, in your hand, because that's where his deepest will is manifest. On the principle that we spoke about today in today's Hayom Yom, that the end is wedged in the beginning. Soifan v'techilas, and the end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning is wedged in the end. So where do you find God's nearest essential sense of what he wants? In the physical mitzvah. So similarly, a mashal. Mashal is a way of investing in developing a concept, an idea, in a way that we'll call it physicalizes it. It makes it more graspable, approachable. Look at Moshe Katsu. Well, he says, Mashal HaKadmaini. This is Shlomo HaMelech, the Torah itself. Oh, I'm wrong. I have a note that I wrote at the bottom of the page. It's not from Shlomo HaMelech. It's from Shmuel Aleph. First Shmuel prophet. Shmuel calls it a Moshe HaKadmaini. His galus etzem rotzen or, and what does that mean? That the mitzvah is the place where you will find the essence of the revelation of God's supernal will, the Ratzon Ein Sof. It can't, that essence of God's will cannot come to revelation to a creature only by the investment of God's will, the asiya gashmi, in the physical thing, which is the masa ha-mitzvah, which is the principle, the beginning is wedged in the end. Oh, and it says dafka, specifically. Chassidus adds that word. Sefer Yetzirah says that the beginning is wedged in the end, and we add the word dafka specifically. Aviva, your hand is up.
Right. It just takes me a while to figure out how to unmute. Sorry.
Okay.
So back to, I'm confused because I don't, what says, Nikrai mitzvahs levushin shehem gamken bechinus mashal.
They're a
I know
mashal.
you just really tried to explain this, but maybe I'm translating it, maybe I'm not get, it's saying that like mitzvahs are just a mashal for
Yeah,
what's really
when you say it
happening.
like that, I get what your question is.
Thank you.
What is a mashal? A mashal is a way of containing an idea in something that you can understand, right? Let me give you a mashal for that, right? And so I'm going to give you in totally different terms a way that allows you to understand something which in itself is not in those terms at all, right? That's a mashal. In fact, the word mashal is Michelle, not the lady's word name, Michelle. It's from something. It's an adaptation of something. So the mitzvahs, what are they? You know what they are? They are the containers for God's supernal will. What you see, however, I'll go back to the professor. The professor is scratching on the board, right? And that's stripped of its, no mashal there. He's just writing everything. What does the kid see? The kid sees some kind of abstract art, is meaningless to him. So the teacher has to find some way of translating it for that kid, so the kid can get some grasp of Michelle from what was he talking about. So he comes up with various mashalim, right? So we're coming up with all the time. We come up with mashalim, right? I mean, let me give you an example, right, of that. So the mitzvahs exemplify in a totally different structure, right, than what's in the professor's mind. In the professor's mind, it doesn't exist like that, but it exists down here like that, and it gives you an idea. So it's a mashal. The mitzvah is a container for the Ratzon HaElyon, but it doesn't look like Ratzon HaElyon. In fact, Ratzon HaElyon doesn't look like anything. You can't see it straight on.
Great.
You can only see it and grasp it when it's in the container.
I'm clapping my hands for real.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
It's like light. Light, you can't touch light, but there's a way of delivering light. It's called a light bulb, right? So it's a container for it. Okay. And that's why Lochen Nikra HaMitzvahs Levushin. That's why mitzvahs are called garments. The Shorish HaMitzvahs Gavaya, and the root of them, like in Einstein's mind, Lahavdo. No, he don't say he's a Jewish fellow, Einstein. In Einstein's mind, Mitzad Shroshim were for the root from where they're coming, the Bechinas Keser Elyon, from the supernal crown, which is called also Taruch Amudei Or, the 620 pillars of light. 620 again, the 613 plus the 7 mitzvahs midrabanan, right? The Nistalshalu, and this came down from Einstein's mind, from the Or Ein Sof himself, came down and down and down. It descended Al Yedei, oh, here's the word, Cyrus. Now this is hairs, but it's also the word gate. I mean, it's roughly equivalent to gates and hairs, passageways, right? It came down. Until it got descended down below, Biasiya Gashmi, in a physical thing, and he gives the mitzvah of tzitzis. I mentioned this also a few other times. Tzitzis is an interesting. The din of tzitzis is that the wool of the tzitzis has to be of the same wool as the garment. Mina klaf. It has to be from the same garment. So the garment, you wrap yourself in the talus. That's the or hasoived, right? Surrounding, all-encompassing light. You wrap. But there are strings which take that all-encompassing light and bring it down. Those are the tzitzis. And the tzitzis are of the same the same fabric as the garment, which means, like our Hanukkah menorah, that though it's a light which is coming from a physical oil, and a physical wick and oil, it's a light. The light itself embodies something. As you look at any lantern, any fire, any campfire, but these are holy lights, embodies something much deeper than the physical light. So the physical light is the container for something much deeper. And that's part of the story that the lights of Hanukkah are telling us, that this light we see with our eye is just a mashal, telling a story that we can understand of something that is much deeper. And the tzitzis are just the drawings down, but they have to be of the same stuff because they're drawing down the infinite, the surrounding with it. And that's another one of these, is the sukkah. The sukkah, you have the experience of transcendence because you live inside it. So there, it's a different kind of a mashal, but it's, I'm inside, I'm a yesh, right? Here I am, yesh, and I'm inside an ayin. I'm inside the surrounding light. So these are just examples. Ubehem dafka nisgala, and the mitzvahs themselves specifically are the place where there is a revelation of the Ratzoni Yisborach, of God's will, and he brings the two expressions, one of which I've been harping on all night, the other we haven't seen before, tonight, in the Shabbos, right? Shabbos davening, the songs before Kiddush, Soif Ma'aseh b'machshava techila. The end of deed is first in thought. What God initially conceived of, back to Einstein, in his head, is the last thing that comes out. An invention is another good way of thinking. The genius, Edison, Tesla, had a concept about electricity and how it worked, but in order to make any money, they had to instantiate it in something that expressed it, right? So the instantiation was really just a compartmentalization, a lavouche, if you will, for something much deeper, right? So the expression that we say, Soif Ma'aseh b'machshava techila, what's first in thought is last in deed. But the point here is that last in deed is an expression of, and part and parcel of, what was first in thought, or the other way of saying something similar is the one that we have been talking about, that noitz techilas and b'soifim, the beginning is wedged in the end. I'll just finish this thought, and that's where we're going to stop. The Pam Achas Nemar, sometimes it says, Bereshis Bora Alakim. It says when in the act of creation, and this is a good way of ending this, because it depends on how you look at it. It says in the act of creation, the first thing it says, Hashamayim, Bereshis Bora Alakim, Es Hashamayim, the Es Ha'oretz, the heaven and the earth. That way of saying things represents heavenly, that's first in thought. Earth is second. It comes out of, it's a product of that which was first in thought. And then a few psukim later, in the same parsha, in Bereshis, it says, in this one, heaven comes first. And then a little later, it says a pasuk, B'yayim aseis Hashem Elokim, on the day that Hashem, God, created Eretz v'Shamayim, earth, then heaven. And in that, Eretz is the healer. So Eretz is first, right? That's the end, in which is wedged the beginning. But the end, to end tonight's session, is the main point. The Maisa. Maisa hua ikr. Now we know why deed is the main thing. Deed is the main thing. Maisa HaMitzvahs is the main thing, because God's most deep consciousness is invested in the physical mitzvah. Now, we'll come back to the Hanukkah lights, believe it or not, but we're on the road, and we're going to stop there for tonight. So, any questions?
No, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have to end, though, before I cancel this, this is called Chassidus, so what? So what? What do we have from this? What can we take from it? What can we live with?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around. You said a person who's completely open is constantly renewing himself. And like
Right.
when you said that, I was thinking of one of those graphs that, it starts at the bottom and shoots up and then just shoots down and shoots up. It's like, real sharp edges, triangular. And
Right.
it's like, the Rebbe said, like a chassid mind betters himself every day. It's better tomorrow than he was today.
Right.
And it's just like, how do you do this?
How?
Yeah, how do we get to that point where we're constantly elevating? Like I work on myself, I
Constantly
refine
elevating.
myself, but
Right.
it's like we are our own worst critics. And so for me, it's like,
Good.
am I really improving? Am I?
All right. That's a great question. Somebody want to help out with that? How? How do you get into the modality of progressing and not just living, flatland? Yeah, Louisa?
I think something that I actually posted in the kitchen right now where we ate, it's quoting the Ramchal, basically asking us that we should be constantly questioning. You know what? Let me get it. I'll give me 1 second.
Sure.
So the Ramchal says in Derech Eitz Chaim that every day one should ask himself the following questions. Who am I? Why did I come to the world? What is the Kodesh Baruch Hu asking of me? What did the Avos do that Hashem loved them so much? What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? What did David HaMelech and all the other tzaddikim before us do? Are my deeds like theirs? Where am I compared to the Avos, Moshe Rabbeinu, and David HaMelech? Am I following the path of tzaddikim or not? And the Ramchal says these contemplations are the most powerful remedy against the Yetzer Hara. They're easy to do just by thinking about it and having that in our consciousness. The results are great because day by day, when that's like the backdrop, then a person can only progress.
Okay. So point number one, you set a dogma, an example for where you want to be by looking at people, as we said, look at the people, as we said, the yom-yom. And when it comes to ruchnius, you look at people who are higher than you, right? Okay, but that That's great, step number one. But that can also lead to, as Moshe expressed, it could lead to a bit of depression. I'll never get there. I can never be like that. Okay, so I would add point number two. You need to start with that you, as a human being, know that the reason you have been created is to go from strength to strength. That's what he's saying. Know that's why you're created, to go. Now, how? Any moment, any next experience, you hang up this Zoom, something's going to be happening. You say, what can I do in this next moment to add to the holiness of it? Anything. Your wife says something to you, and I'm just using this as an example, by the way, for myself. I'm not implying anything about anyone else's relationship. Your husband says something to you, and your gut says, I'm angry. Well, you don't get angry. You figure, how am I going to turn this into a flowing positive experience? Just take it, and I don't want to get long-winded here, but one of the Yom we read earlier this week is about Hashgacha Pratis. Hashgacha Pratis is twofold. Not only that whatever moment and experience you're in is given and created for you to be from God, but in that experience is exactly what you need to move, Moshe, to the next step of getting next little notch on that graph of going up. And just think about it. If you know that that's what you're there for, pause and say, how can I do it? What can I do with this moment? I mean, it could be, I'd have these experiences all day long. I came from meeting today. I had plenty of examples where I could have said something negative about something. And I said, how can I bring, I didn't, I just sat there, what can I do now to bring positivity into this environment? And that's just a general thing, any moment. Take the time to pause and say, what can I do to bring positivity, Al-Pi Torah, Kedusha, into the environment? I'll tell you a little thing. We're getting out of the Uber to go back to the office. There are two of us in the car. And one guy next to me, he goes out first. And he says to the driver, thank you. And I don't know, I picked up on the driver something. And I said to him, and God bless you. And his face lit up and he said, and God bless you also. So, God's name was mentioned. Just a little bit of presence, that's all.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
a little bit of
it
presence.
Seems a little easy to kind of keep at the forefront.
Yeah, don't go for the big ones. Go for the little ones.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
Sure.
don't have such high expectations.
Right.
Like grab the moment when you identify it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
I think it's not just to not have such grandiose expectations of the big things, but the mashal, I believe it's a mashal that at a certain point when we have clarity, Hashem, Mashiach should come, we should have that clarity right away, that the tzaddikim will look and say, this is what I had to overcome. And the Rashaim will look and say, this is what I had to come. And it's all one hair by one strand of hair by one strand of hair that adds up, where it's like the Rashaim are going to look and say, it was only a little strand of hair. And the tzaddikim are going to say, wow, look at how much this added up. Because really, it's one strand of hair at a time of that moment and opportunity, just like what you're saying with getting out of the Uber.
All right, guys. Thank you. And let's do it till we meet again.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Thank you.